by subscribing and leaving comments.
On October 26, 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were interviewed by Jack Webster in Vancouver shortly following a get-together of sorts at the Georgia Hotel, or Hotel Georgia as it's commonly referred to, for a screening of the PG film, Patterson-Gimlin film. And Webster was a well-known radio host, and that interview really hadn't surfaced per se in the public until on my channel. I think it was in 2017 maybe, when I made it public via John Green, who gave me permission to record it. He had a copy of it, although some of the interview is missing. Not sure how much, but probably not a lot. The late Bobby Short had a transcription on our website, and I think that John Green had a transcription in one of his books, but I may be mistaken. But this is the interview, and yes, I had formally uploaded it to my channel, but now I will do a little bit of a review, analysis, and a reaction to what they say, because there's some very important information that some may not have realized, and maybe some haven't heard the interview. I do want to thank MK Davis, because I will be using some of his stabilization of the Patterson-Gimlin film, and there'll be some other parts that I'll use from the 1968 first Bigfoot documentary from the British Broadcasting Corporation called Bigfoot, America's Abominable Snowman. So yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy. At first, the audio is going to be a little iffy, but it will even out, and you'll be able to hear it just fine, I think. Enjoy.
I've been interviewing eyewitnesses of Sasquatch sightings, Sasquatch themselves, since 1954. And I might as well tell you that the first time I've been what you might call really impressed. I saw the film taken by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin near Eureka, California, on Friday afternoon, the 20th of October. And I'll tell you, it's like an eyewitness of a flying saucer, a personal one. Well, Roger was kind of excited, but it shows quite clearly a huge, human-like, fur-covered creature striding along a creek bed in a most distinctive manner. I think you can see honestly from the film that the creature is feet. When it turns sideways, you can see the mammary glands, and the hips appear to be a massive thickness right through. And my immediate reaction was, you know, it's a phony, and then you begin to think about it, and you think, if that's wearing a costume, it's the most unusual costume, because there's no sagging, no bulging, no nothing. And then the footprints are there, the actual footprints of this creature in the Bigfoot country are deep. So the creature must be a heavy creature. Unless it's a very tall man carrying a great deal of lead weight around his shoulders. However, here's the man that took the picture. Roger Patterson from Yakima. Now, Roger, took you to that place, and precisely where was it, and why did you go there?
Well, first of all, the reason that we were in this place is I've been filming a documentary on this thing for the past 8 months or so, and I've been going to areas, interviewing people that have seen these creatures, other than myself now, and
The footage that you just saw of Patterson, it's unrelated to this interview that you're listening to. That footage comes from a British Broadcasting Corporation documentary about Bigfoot from summer of '68 when it was aired on UK television. I just want to point out the excitement in both Patterson and Gimlin's voices. This was an interview done shortly after the filming, within, I guess, 5 days, if you do the math. And I also forgot to mention that this is in no way, shape, or form an AI-generated interview. I can assure you of that. Someone had written a comment on my YouTube channel insinuating strongly that this is just an AI-generated interview. It's not. It's not. And to that individual, please just do your research. I know it's easy to be fooled by AI nowadays, and we have to be very careful. I commend you on questioning that. But in this case, there's a lot of background on this interview, and it's easy to prove that's not AI, starting with the fact that it's talked about in publications that long predate any awareness of AI, right back to the 70s. And then Bobby Short has it on our website as well, a transcription of the interview. And yeah, so please don't think that it's AI. It's not. Anyhow, Roger and Bob are very excited. You can hear in their voices. Does that mean that it's real? No, it just means that that they're excited about what happened, and maybe that speaks volumes. Anyways, just thought I'd bring that up and certainly mention the AI thing. I think it's important to let the viewer know, in case you didn't, that Patterson and Gimlin weren't there to capture on film a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They were there because a few months prior, in late August and then early September, footprints had been found very close to that specific area where they filmed Patty, on Onion Creek Mountain and Blue Creek Mountain, which is not that far away. So footprints were found and they were documented. Roger became aware of that through John Green and others, and he wanted to go back to Bluff Creek because he had been there earlier, a few years before. He wanted to go back there because it was what he thought was an active Bigfoot Sasquatch area. So he wasn't really prepared truly to film a Sasquatch, and he didn't have the proper film. And I mean, he was there to look at footprints. That's what he was expecting to find. He was not expecting to. He was hoping to film the Bigfoot, but not expecting to film the Bigfoot. So those who think that he went there with the intent of filming a Sasquatch, you're mistaken. Unless, of course, you feel it's fake, then of course he was there to film a hoax. But those who are of the mind that the Patterson-Gimlin film is legit, the story checks out because things had been found there a few months prior, and he was there to follow up. And he was hoping to film stationary objects, tracks in on Blue Creek and Onion Mountain. He was hoping to film those footprints for his documentary that he was working on. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Had went to this particular area because a month before this they had found 3 different sets of tracks up in that area.
Now, going back to you, first of all, you showed some routine film of your pack horses, didn't you?
Right.
Now, what were you doing filming at that particular time on the pack horse bit?
Well, we had hadn't taken any, and I thought right of that particular area there before, and there was an area right in there. There was some of these.
You were just taking odd shots then,
just taking some shots of the scenery and of myself and Bob in that area.
Now we'll just jump to what you first saw that made you excited.
All right, we rounded a bend in the road.
You were walking?
No, we were riding.
You on a horse?
Riding on horses.
Where was your camera?
The camera was in my saddlebags on the left-hand side.
Who was we?
Bob Gimlin and myself.
Bob's right here, right?
Uh-huh.
So you're riding on the horses, your camera's in the saddlebag, you come around the bend, and then what happens?
All of a sudden, I caught something out of the glimpse out of the corner of my eye, and my horse immediately reared on me, and I tried to pull him down, and at this instant, after I seen the object to the side, I wasn't able to see it again for a little bit. It fell with me. I probably pulled him half over, and as he got up, I was able to get up and control him until I went around the other side and got the camera out of the saddlebag, and then I turned my horse loose and was able to start shooting. And
just a minute, you got off your horse and turned it loose.
Right. Well, my horse. No, I was already off my horse. I was on the ground underneath him.
Okay, you got your camera, turned your horse loose.
Right.
Then you looked up, and what did you see?
Looked up, and I seen this creature about 120 away, and she was at that point had turned around and was just going up the bank, this small bank over there, and I started running and trying to get a shot of her, and I yelled at Bob to cover me.
Where was Bob? Where were you then, Bob? Bob Gibb from Yakima.
I was directly behind Roger, mounted on the horse that I was riding on, and
Also, when this creature, we sighted this creature, my horse frightened from it too, but he was an older, seasoned horse, and I controlled him quite well because I stayed in the saddle. And I did cover Roger at the time he told me to cover him. And I also,
What do you mean cover him?
I took my rifle from the scabbard, from the saddle, and in the event that this creature would attack, I felt that I could protect him somewhat.
Did you have your eye on the creature all the time?
Most of the time, when I didn't have him on the ground where I had trying to control the horse on, it was a little bit unlevel. And
What was the creature then doing when you first saw it?
when I first saw it, it was standing, looking straight at me,
Face on.
face on.
Describe it to me, Bob.
It was a large, hairy creature with arms that hang down beside its, four down on its sides, below its knees, and it was quite.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I think Bob's a little excited here. They were below the knees; they were above the knees.
But they were well down on the thighs, weren't they?
Way down, right?
Because I could see that on the film tonight.
Yeah.
They were well down on the thighs.
Well, now that's interesting. Patterson and Gimlin do not agree on the arm length of Patty. I've always thought that was interesting because my thinking is if it's a hoax, you're going to sit down with each other and you're going to work through all the details to make sure that you're saying the same thing. Now, you could counter and say, well, no, what you want to do is have a few things wrong so it seems legit. Well, okay. Thing is, it seems as though they just don't agree on the arm length, and Roger says, I think Bob's excited. And there are a lot of people who feel that Patty's arms are longer than you would expect from a human. But I'm not so sure about that because Patty is stooped, and when she straightens out, if she were to straighten out, I don't think you'd see arms below the knees. And I've seen many humans with arms at their knees, or at least their fingers are extending past their knees. So I don't think Patty's arms are any longer than a human's, to be honest with you. But it is interesting that Roger and Bob disagreed on the arm length. I find that very interesting. The interviewer, Jack Webster, he's quite aggressive. That was his style. He was renowned, infamous for being an aggressive interviewer. And I know that bothers a lot of people. That was just his style. He really, he's interrupting and he's really putting Patterson and Gimlin on the spot, which I guess is a good thing when you're interviewing someone and perhaps wondering if it's legit or fake. It can really put people in the hot seat and make them uncomfortable. I think that Gimlin and Patterson held up pretty good, all things considered. If it was a hoax, they don't seem to be shaking in their boots. There's legit excitement, and I find it interesting that a lot of people think that both men were thrown off the horse. Neither were thrown off the horse. Patterson pulled his horse down, as he mentions, and Gimlin was able to steady his horse and stayed on his horse. He never got off the horse until much later after Patty was gone. That's interesting in case you didn't know that. We're hearing it from the horse's mouth here that he stayed on his horse. So there you go. Let's continue.
And she was heavy, although I had no way of estimating her weight at that time, and only guessed since then. But she turned then, she stood there for an instant, and she turned and started up over this bar.
Now, when you looked at her, describe her physically to me. Was there any shred of clothing of any kind?
No clothing at all on this creature, covered with hair only, except around the face and nose. The nose was bare, and around the cheeks were bare.
What kind of nose did it have?
It had a broad, flat nose.
Like a gorilla's nose with the open nostrils?
No, not like that. The nostrils you could not see down.
Would you agree with kind of human-type nose?
That's right.
What about the lips?
The lips I never really noticed that much at that particular time when she was face on to me, because she just stood there for an instant and turned and walked away with her, started walking away.
Any sound at all?
No.
Now, what about the physical characteristics, her figure?
She was kind of slumped and very heavily through her entire body was heavy. And
were the breasts visible?
They were visible.
Were they covered with hair?
Were covered with hair.
Mm-hmm. Now, the proportions of the body. Was it like a giant human?
Yes, it seemed to be, to me, more like a giant man, except it had breasts. This was one thing that, her characteristics, and the anthropologist and zoologist this evening brought this out, that it seemed to be more like a huge man. In other words, she didn't have a narrow waist and a big set of hips like that we would think of as a woman.
Earlier, I mentioned how one of the viewers had thought that perhaps this interview was AI. Well, he didn't think it was. He was pretty adamant that it was AI generated. It's not. And I had another viewer, for all I can remember, it may be the same viewer, question about the fact that Patty was recognized as female, and when that happened. As far as they were concerned, it didn't happen until in the early 2000s, when we finally figured out that Patty was female. And I had to correct that individual, because right from the get-go, Roger and Bob recognized that Patty was female. And I pointed out to that viewer that there was an interview done that the night of the filming, and it was put in a newspaper article the day after, and that was called Mrs. Bigfoot is Filmed, if I remember correctly. And you can hear in this interview that both men are referring to the subject, Patty, as she. So there it is. There's the proof. The proof is in the pudding with the newspaper article on the 21st of October, and then this interview on the 26th. So yeah, Patty was recognized by both Bob and Roger as being female right from the get-go, and all the scientists that watched it too were perplexed to see breasts on a subject that walked like a man. It just didn't jibe with what they knew as far as male and female qualities and evolution. Anyhow, let's proceed.
And when it strode away from the camera, it walked very much like a huge, big, strong man, didn't it?
Well, it did. However, I would make the estimate that, or the judgment, I might say, that a female of this kind wouldn't look very female-ish under the environment that she would maybe have to...
Bob, how did you feel when you saw it? Do you think somebody was pulling a gag on you?
No, not it. Just it was surprising, and we talked about these things many times, and actually talked what we would do if we happened to see one.
Now, before we finish the chase, you had your rifle out the scabbard. What kind of rifle was it?
30-06 rifle.
And you can use a rifle, obviously.
Yes, I can. I've grown up
Would
with
have been
one.
worth $100,000 cash to you if you had raised that rifle and shot this creature. You must have known that.
I don't believe I could do it.
Even if you just wounded it.
Well, like Roger
Hey?
That would be a
mess.
a mess. To both Bob and I, we had agreed that we will not shoot one of these creatures unless she would attack us or that we would be protecting our lives. I think that we would have to fear for our own lives if we were to wound and make a terrible mess out of something like
Right.
this.
So finally, I'm back to Roger Patterson again. When you got your camera steadied, did you stand still and take the pictures I saw, or did you follow it on foot? Her, we should say follow her on foot.
I followed it on foot because this was the only way that I had. I knew this situation, of course, at the time, and I could see her moving away from me, and I knew Bob was there, and I thought, if I'm ever going to get any pictures, I'll have to do it now. And I ran as best I could and trotted.
How close did you... The closest.
Well, I think we were closer when we first seen her than any other time, don't you, Bob?
No, I disagree with you there. I believe just immediately after we got across the creek, we were probably closer to her at that time than we were when we first sighted her, because she had her back to us at that time, and or at least I was closer because I ran a little farther up on the horse. I was moving pretty fast, and I got him finally across the creek. So I believe at that time when I crossed the creek, I was the closest I ever was to her, and I believe it was about 90 feet at that time.
Now, Roger, how far did you notice colors of the palms of the hands there? Were you close enough for that?
I was, but I never noticed.
A lot of details are given by both Roger and Bob, a lot here by Bob, describing what he saw because he saw Patty longer. The other thing is, course, the hoax insinuation. We don't know. I can't say with any certainty if it's a hoax or not. My feeling is it's not a hoax based on the men's reaction, based on many things, including the fact that there was supposed to be someone else who was going to go along with Roger, but at the last minute they bailed. Bob Hieronymus, the man who claims to have been in a suit on that day, he's got so many holes in his story. I hope to make a video about that because I think most of the viewers here will be shocked to learn what has been uncovered about his story and his claims. But the other thing to think about is the fact that it was hunting season, and let's say that Roger and Bob planned this hoax, and Bob Hieronymus put on a suit and traipsed through Bluff Creek. Risky, very risky. Those men didn't know who was in that area. Could have been a hunter, and whoever was there, be it a real Bigfoot or someone in a suit, could have been shot easily. That's one thing that Patterson and Gimlin could not control. So it was really risky. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to put on an ape suit, even if someone says they're going to pay me $1,000 and walk, through a forest area, not knowing whether I'm going to be shot or not. I wouldn't do it. Anyways, I wanted to also, I got to find it. Well, here it is. I want to point out a book, and I will show you up close on the screen. This book is by Charles Edson, My Travels with Bigfoot. In this book, Edison talks about being in Bluff Creek area on October 20th and seeing both Roger and Bob on horseback. He claims he was with another individual. He said there was only two men, Roger and Bob, not a third. He eventually became a sheriff of one of the counties, maybe Humboldt. I have to read the back. Maybe you can see it on the screen here because I'm showing you some of the pages. But he devotes a chapter in the book, as you can see. And then he talks about what he saw on that day. And I'll read a bit of that to you right now. Sorry, I had to put on my glasses, my reading glasses, because I won't be able to see this. But you can see the table of contents on page 69, chapter 10, female Bigfoot caught on film. And, this is a hard book to find, a really hard book to find. It's quite rare. And in reading the back, I think I said he might have been the sheriff of Humboldt County, but it was actually Siskiyou County, if I'm saying that right. I'm Canadian, so I'm not sure about these pronunciations. But on page 74, he talks about how he had previously seen a Bigfoot. He was hoping to see one again. And so I'll read from page halfway down, on page 74. In October of that year, I almost got my wish, but a couple of other guys beat me to it. A couple of horse breeders and cattlemen by the names of Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson. Red, who's the person he's with, Red and I had happened to be scouting the Bluff Creek area up in Del Norte County the day those guys made their controversial film of a female Bigfoot on the run. I'm sure if you haven't even the most vicarious interest in in wildlife, you must have heard of that film by now. Hell, it was all in the paper, shown on TV, in practically every country on Earth. As for whether or not Gimlin and Patterson shot film of a real Bigfoot or a man dressed up in a fursuit, it appears the jury is still out, weighing all the pros and the cons. And I'll pause it there for a second because my screen's been freezing up on me. To be continued in a moment. Continuing, a lot of brilliant experts say yes, but there are a lot more who say no way. Nobody asked me, but if they did, I'd have to say yes. And not just out of loyalty to the Bigfoot either. It wasn't sheer coincidence that Red and I happened to be tracking in that area that day. We accidentally saw Patterson and Gimlin go galloping past us on horseback. Of course, at the time, we didn't know who the hell those guys were or what they were up to. We only knew we didn't care to get involved in any kind of social chit-chat, nor have to explain what we were doing in the area. We just squatted down and hid behind some underbrush until they rode past us. When we saw they were lugging a lot of heavy equipment with them on a pack horse, I guess we just figured they were timber surveyors. Either that or gold miners, as there'd been a lot of prospecting for gold in that area in recent months. I'm going to pause it there because I don't want my screen to freeze, and I'll be back in a second. Continuing. It wasn't until later that we found out it was only about a half hour after we spotted them that they must have spotted that female Bigfoot and gotten their historical 16mm film. Now for the coincidence. We were in that precise area for a reason. Some hunters had reported seeing tracks in this vicinity only a few days earlier, and judging by the location they described when Red and I questioned them, it had to be right in the same general area where Patterson and his buddy had filmed their female. As I said, they got there first. But since I didn't have a movie camera with me, I'm kind of glad they did, because controversial or not, I'd like to think at last somebody came up with what I fully believe to be concrete evidence that these creatures exist. There's a lot of question about whether or not what Charles Edson is saying is true or not. We don't know. But it's another layer to the story.
Now, how far did you follow her?
I didn't follow her any much further than when my camera run out of film, and I knew that it was out. And Bob got on his horse and went after her then. And from that point, he seen her more than I did. I never seen her again.
How far were you able to follow her?
I watched her until she went up a road about 300 yards, and she went around and in the road, and that was the last I seen of her.
Mm-hmm. Now, after all this dreadful excitement, what did the pair of you do? Here you, after all these hundreds of years of rumors and sightings and all the rest of it, all up and down the Pacific Northwest and in Michigan and Wisconsin and everywhere else, what did you do when you're standing there, you've recovered from the shock with a camera full of film? I mean, just tell me precisely what you did at that time. What did you say to each other?
Well, when Bob come back, I yelled for him, Bob, come back, because at this point my horse was, I didn't know where, and the pack horse was gone. My scabbard, my rifle was in the scabbard on the horse, and the tracks before down in there that we had heard about were in a set of 3, and there was a bigger one there, and I felt that possibly there was a male close in there.
You were getting nervous.
I was getting nervous.
And then you were on foot there without your rifle.
I was on foot without anything, and I yelled for Bob to come back, and we would think the thing over. And
was that the time you broke off the chase, you might say?
Right, that was when I last seen her go around the curve. And at that time I went back and proceeded to gather up Roger's horses, or his horse that he was riding in the pack horse. And
then what?
After chasing him up and down the road for a little while and finally catching him, well, we talked it over, and I said I'd check around and see if maybe that I could find some tracks where she had come into this area and possibly sight the other one. So I took the camera while he gathered up his stuff and
you
just
scouted around for a while, did you?
Yes.
Then when did you make the... Now, were you able to identify specifically the tracks she had made while you were following her?
Yes, because immediately after we went across and immediately after I called Bob back, we looked at the tracks, and they were the tracks were there.
These are the tracks we saw in the movie tonight.
That's right.
The tracks for which you had the plaster cast tonight.
Mm-hmm.
How come you had plaster cast with you?
We didn't
plaster
have,
with you.
We didn't have plaster, Paris, with it. We had to go back to the truck and get plaster and come up and cast them.
How long would that take you to leave the scene, go back to the truck, and come up again?
We were at that point about 2 miles from that area?
Yeah, about 2 miles, I'd say. By the road, it was just about an even 2 miles. Across the hill, or that way, it was a little shorter, but we went through.
Now, okay, so you then gave up. You took the plaster tracks. How deep were these tracks, by the way, in inches? Inch and a quarter? Here they are, here.
Some of them were down as far as 3.5, the softer soil. These particular ones we took here weren't quite so deep because they were flatter tracks.
A lot of people say, oh, how convenient. Patterson ran out of film. You know, we see all these hoaxes nowadays, blatant hoaxes, where you only see a little clip and then the video ends. You have to understand the camera that Patterson was using. It's a Kodak K100, and there's not a lot of film in those things. I think it's 100 feet of film, and that's only, a couple minutes. And Patterson, film was expensive back then, and he had already used some of that film that was in the camera, and so he only had so much left. And if you understand anything about those old cameras, not that I'm an expert, but I have a few of those cameras behind me. You can maybe see one right back in there. It's not like today where you just insert a memory card and then you're good to go. You had to change out the film, and you had to do it in darkness, or you would ruin the film. It was quite a chore to change the film. So there's no way that Patterson could have run out of film and changed it so quickly that he could have caught anything else on film, unless the Bigfoot just stayed there and waited for him. But I'm guessing it takes a couple minutes, if not more, to actually do that and do it proper without ruining the film that's in there. So bear that in mind, please. What Patterson talked about, finding other Bigfoot footprints there, has created a lot of confusion with people. And you kind of have to know a little bit of the history and know exactly what he's referring to. Let me put on my reading glasses so I can read the exact quote that what he said. Here's the quote. Patterson said, "The tracks before, down in there, that we had heard about were in a set of 3, and there was a bigger one there, and I felt it was possibly a male." Patterson felt it was possibly a male. That's why they kind of were careful, and that's why he asked Gimlin to cover him in case there was another Bigfoot there. Patterson and Gimlin did not find other sets of tracks. They only saw the tracks that Patty left. What they're referring to is the footprints that were found on Onion Mountain and Blue Creek Mountain a couple months prior. And those were investigated by John Green, Renee DeHinden, and a few others. And it was those prints that prompted Patterson to go back to Bluff Creek. As I mentioned before, he was there earlier, a few years back. And that's why he was there. He's not referring to finding, other sets of Bigfoot prints. He did not find other sets of Bigfoot prints there. They were found by others and investigated by others. But that's what was the catalyst bringing him back to Bluff Creek to hopefully get some material for his documentary, which ultimately he did. More than he bargained for, actually. Yeah, so there you go. Now it's all settled. Because of the previous print find by others back in late August and early September, that's why Patterson and Gimlin were there, and that's why they had plaster with them. They were hoping to look at those prints or maybe find other prints because there was seemingly a lot of activity, a lot of footprints found on the roads that were just being graded out there. So that's why they had plaster, in case you're wondering. Yeah. In case you're wondering, there you know. Now you know.
All right, now, have any of the zoologists or the people you consulted, have they given you any idea of the weight of this creature?
No,
the height of the weight?
They did on the height, measuring by of her feet in the picture, and they estimated her height to be approximately 6'9".
What was the length of the stride?
Pardon me, but this was estimated on a 14-inch track, and these were 14.5 inches, which would add quite a considerable bit.
What was the stride cadence? I believe that's the proper technical description.
She averaged a 41-inch stride, somewhere thereabouts. She was taking sheep to a 46-inch stride.
So that was 3 feet 5 to 12 feet 36, 12, 14, 48. 3 feet 5 to 3 feet 10.
Yes.
Oh, goodness gracious me.
And of course
there must be lots of them around there. I mean, what would they be doing down at the creek?
Well, they're in this creek. We didn't fish it, but we seen them jumping, and I could only surmise what she was either drinking or possibly trying to catch fish in the creek.
Any sign of fishes? What's the word? Faces around? Any other tracks of the animal?
There was no droppings at all.
That's the word I was looking for. Well, now what? You're going to sell this film to the highest bidder?
Well, we just haven't made any definite plans, but I would imagine that we will probably sell it.
How can you afford to take all this time off to go down? Oh, no, rather, first of all, how long have you been looking for Sasquatch, live Sasquatch?
Well, off and on for about 7.5 years. But in the last 4 years, I've made much more of an effort than any other time.
You're financially independent?
Well, somewhat, yes.
In other words, you can go out this kind of cable without suffering too much financially?
Well, it's been tough.
Why has nobody ever found any bones of these Sasquatch down in that Bigfoot country where there have been reports of so many tracks?
Well, not only down in that country, but there's been tracks all over the Northwest in Canada, as you well know, in Canada. But they seem, I think anyway, this maybe doesn't agree with all of the fellas that's been involved in this, but they seem to dwell primarily in the rainforest, or they can get to the rainforest fairly easy, and bones in this type of climate, in a rainforest climate, don't last very long.
Do you realize, boys, Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson, there are people who are going to say you're total nuts. You know that, don't you? You're held up to ridicule by some people.
Well, I've taken quite a bit of this in the past, and it doesn't surprise me. I know they're there, and I know that we're going to get one in the next possibly 5 to 10 years, or maybe sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do, I think there's going to have to be many people, and also scientists, maybe eat a little crow.
Now, you said they were vegetarians, eh?
I don't think that they're solely vegetarians.
You think they go for fish, like bear would go for fish?
I think that they will eat what they have to keep alive. And I think that in some areas, if they can get enough vegetation, they probably...
So many people have wondered what crick is. That's a word that I'm familiar with since I was a kid. My grandparents called it a crick. It's a creek. It's just a colloquial pronunciation, I guess. So creek is crick. That's what they're referring to when they say Bluff Creek or down at the creek or the water level of the creek. It's creek. And I know that some people from other areas in Canada and the US may not know that, but crick equals creek. That ends the interview. Unfortunately, part of it's missing. I've tried desperately to find the remaining bits. Reached out to radio stations that Jack Webster was working for, and all I got back was that the files, the audio has been lost to time. They normally would just toss it, reuse it. It's gone. So thankfully, John Green had a copy. Unfortunately, not all of it, but I'm pretty sure most of it. They started delving into things about potential dietary habits of Bigfoot, but I think we got the main gist of what happened there. And again, this is an interview that happened 6 days after the footage. It is what it is. Take it for what it is. Does it mean that everything's legit? No, it doesn't. But I think that the reactions of the men do speak volumes, in my opinion. They don't sound like they're nervous. They don't sound like they're hiding anything. They sound like they're very excited. And again, they argued about one of the details, which is interesting. But there you have the recount by the two men who were there. Real or fake, whatever it may be. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.